What's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of the Lakers Outsiders podcast. I'm your host, Gary Kester, here with you as always, and joining me pretty much as always now, since it's the playoffs, we're coming at you full circle, full steam ahead. Hani Amadian joins me today. Hani, your Raptors are done, but your Lakers are still going. We're going to talk about the Lakers today, but can we just take a second to not only laugh about the Celtics, who blew a 17-point lead today, and are now trailed 2-0 to the Miami Heat in the Eastern Conference Finals. But can we talk about the LA Clippers, the preseason champions, the regular season champions, even though they took half their games off? Just the media crowned LA Clippers blowing a 3-1 lead in the second round and no longer being allowed to play because they're done.
Look, first of all, nothing would make me happier than talking about that. If you don't want to talk about Lakers Nuggets today, I'm totally cool with that. We can go all night about the Clippers and the Celtics. So the Lakers are really, really good, and every game that we watch them play, for the most part in the playoffs right now, we are enjoying them very, very much. Nothing has been more entertaining than these last 3 days when the Lakers haven't even played, and we've just been watching Clippers meltdown, Celtics meltdown, back to back. Oh, this is heaven. I think I have ascended into heaven.
I'm down to just do like a full podcast laughing at the Clippers, and at the end we'll just give our Lakers Nuggets predictions. We won't even preview it. We'll just I think the Lakers win in however many games. But yeah, I mean, just an epic collapse. And I don't want to take away from the Nuggets, because the Nuggets, for some reason, they don't take their final form until they're down 3-1 in a series and down double digits in game 5. All of a sudden, then the light switch, the light bulb goes on, and they start playing some amazing basketball. So maybe the Lakers should just let the Nuggets take the first 2 games, and then, or at least take the first game, and then like something has to give after that.
I've been thinking about this a lot. So if the Nuggets end up winning game 1 and then the Lakers win 3 straight, who's winning game 5? Something has to give in that instance, and I'm all for this science experiment to happen.
I think the universe would just explode if that happens. It's like when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. Like
it's like 2020 has just been building up to this moment where the Lakers take a 3-1 lead on the Nuggets, and we just don't know what happens next.
Yeah. I don't know. That's the question. Let us know in the chat. I should be able to see all the chat. We've actually thrown this up on Facebook for the first time, so hopefully it's working okay. It seemed to be working okay before we really jumped in here and started BSing about the Clippers. But, man, just an epic choke job, and I don't want to go too much about the Clippers because this is not a Clippers podcast. I just wanted to make sure that we got that in. We should have – I didn't think of this the night it happened. I was having too much fun on Twitter, just laughing at them and seeing all the jokes, all the slander being launched, and we should have done a live reaction pod to that, but we didn't. I will direct you, if you haven't, over to a couple friends of ours over on Locked On Lakers. The intro to that podcast was just absolutely beautiful, so I highly recommend it. But I apologize we didn't get one out. I just didn't even think about it because I was having so much fun that night. But we're here now. We're laughing at them a little bit now. And, hey, we're 24 hours away from talking Lakers-Nuggets Game 1.
You know what the issue is? And this will be my last point on the Clippers. The issue we had in terms of having a podcast immediately after Game 7 is that we didn't, want to be in the spotlight, you might say. For us, it's more about streetlights over spotlights. And, I was busy going to my second job on the bus. And for that reason, I couldn't really be on a podcast showing my face, having my voice be heard. I'm too busy being – it's all about we over me is basically what I'm trying to tell everybody.
I very nearly had to send you a Venmo request for breaking my monitors from spitting water all over them. But it was just hilarious, man. It was a great night. I really didn't think the Nuggets had it in them to pull off a 3-1 series comeback twice. I think it's the first time a team has ever done that, because it's only happened, I think, 13 times now in NBA history. The Nuggets have 2 in the same postseason, so
yeah,
pretty remarkable.
And Doc Rivers has 3 of them.
Yeah. I forgot about the first one. I think it was an 8 seed versus a
Yeah.
1 against I think it was Magic against the Pistons. But man, that's tough. that's It's just amazing to me that the Clippers have twice in the past 5 years been one win away from finally getting to the Western Conference Finals, and they blew a 3-1 lead on both occasions.
You see the Josh Smith Instagram post? I think that was my favorite thing that happened.
Yeah, yeah.
Post Game 7 is Josh Smith out of nowhere coming on Instagram, reminding everybody that the last time the Clippers did this, it was because he went just flaming hot from behind the 3-point line.
Josh Smith turned into Steph Curry for a game and derailed a historic moment for the LA Clippers. And then, yeah, later on, it would result in them trading away Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, just breaking up that whole core. So, yeah, just unreal, unbelievable. I'm shocked that the Lakers are playing the Nuggets, and that's no slight to the Nuggets. I just thought that I remember, Hani, I told you off air, and something I was really wrong about is after game 1, I said I'd be shocked if the Nuggets got more than a game in that series, and they got 4, which was pretty crazy. But yeah, all right. Before we dive into this Lakers Nuggets series, it's a rematch of the 2009 Western Conference Finals, which every Lakers fan should remember unless you're super young. The Lakers won that series in 6. The Lakers would then ultimately go on to beat Dwight Howard's Orlando Magic team in the finals and get Kobe's 4th ring, his first without Shaq. Pretty special moment in Lakers history, and it was the first of back-to-back. So hopefully history repeats itself this year and even next year. But we'll have to see. Ultimately, the Lakers, 8 wins down, 8 more to go. Got to focus on the team in front of them. Can't take this team lightly. We're going to talk about kind of just the series as a whole, offense, defense. If you guys are interested in a good read, Hani actually did a pretty extensive preview of this series up on LakersOutsiders.com, so be sure to check that out. Really good stuff from you, Hani, and we're going to talk about some of those points that you brought up today. I thought some of those were very, very interesting. If you're in the chat and you're sending us questions, we will try and make some time at the end for questions. We'll try not to go too long with this, and we'll have our predictions at the end of this as well. But as always, guys, before we dive in, make sure if you do like this pod, you do like these live streams that we're doing after games, I might actually do like a watch party for some of the East games. I think the next East game might be kind of fun to do this live during one of those games. And if the Celtics lose, it would be great to laugh at the Celtics because I laughed at them blowing a huge lead tonight. Let's not let that go unnoticed. I know it's still funny to laugh about the Clippers, but the Celtics are kind of stepping over or tripping over themselves right now. And the Heat are doing really well. But as always, guys, like I said, these live pods, you can subscribe to us on YouTube. That really, really helps us. And be sure to, if you are watching this on YouTube, be sure to like the video. It really helps us out with the YouTube algorithm. It helps us helps support the channel, helps us grow, and helps us deliver you guys more consistent Lakers content like this. And you can like us on Facebook as well. These should be streaming live on Facebook. And you can follow us on Twitch at twitch.tv/LakersOutsiders. So there's 3 avenues for you. No excuse. Follow us on those. It helps us out a ton. And we'll keep bringing you guys Lakers content. And of course, these will also be up on, man, this is so much plugging. These will be up. This will be up on Podbean as well. After the fact, I'll edit these and throw them up there. Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, they'll be up there as well. So, all right. I'm not even going to plug the socials. I'll plug those at the end. Let's dive into this series. At the time we're recording this, the Lakers are roughly 24 hours away from Game 1 of the Western Conference Finals for the first time in 10 years that they've been this far. Pretty crazy stuff. Hani, what are your initial thoughts on this series and how the Lakers match up with the Nuggets overall?
So, without getting too confident, I do think that this is a pretty great matchup for the Lakers. I don't buy in a whole lot in the regular season matchups as far as, how those translate into the postseason. But I think there are some interesting things to take away from them. And the main thing for me was just how dominant Anthony Davis was in those games. The Nuggets are a pretty solid defensive team. They're not amazing, but they are decent. And a guy like Nikola Jokic, he gets more of a bad rep defensively, I think, than he deserves. He's a much better defender than people kind of give him credit for.
It's how he looks.
Yeah, that is a huge part of it, and he's not a really athletic like rim protector as a center, but he is a guy that positions himself well. He can draw charges. He can still contest shots. But Anthony Davis legitimately was really dominant against him. He averaged, I think, 29 and 9. And in those games, he certainly seemed to have an impact, not only in terms of just his scoring and rebounding and his defense, but he really seemed to fatigue Jokic, who's, a bigger dude in many senses of the word. He seemed to fatigue him late in games. And I think that is a huge part of this series. The Nuggets go as Nikola Jokic goes. And even with Jamal Murray having these amazing performances that he's had in these playoffs, and he has been spectacular. He's had, I think, 2 50-point games, I think 2 other 40-point games. He's had incredible scoring outbursts, but Jokic is the engine to that offense. And if you can tire him out late in games, then that's a big tick mark for the Lakers to check off. And I think a guy like Anthony Davis and even the Lakers' other bigs, who I think will have a much bigger role in this series than they did against the Rockets, and I think JaVale especially can have a big role in terms of his athleticism and kind of getting to the rim. I think that will be a huge key in terms of just making things as hard as possible on Jokic to make him just a little bit worse than he is, because that dude's been, having arguably the best playoffs of any other player in the league right now.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think he gets more of a bad rap on defense than people should give him. And part of it is because of how he looks, and he's not, this freak athlete that you typically would want, and you see in a guy like Anthony Davis, like Dwight Howard, Rudy Gobert, like these, long, athletic, big guys that can protect the basket. He's really not that, but he is an incredibly smart basketball player, and that doesn't you don't see that displayed just on offense. It's definitely on defense too, like you said, Honey. Very good at kind of positioning himself a little bit, and just his basketball IQ is very, very high. And I think that's probably his best asset. And that's saying something because he has legit skills, especially offensively. But yeah, I mean, Jokic is going to be – it's an interesting matchup because I do think the Lakers match up fairly well with this Nuggets team, and especially for Jokic. And I think it's really interesting because Jokic goes from going up against Rudy Gobert in the first round to playing against a Clippers team that didn't really have the bodies. And I didn't think that the Nuggets could beat the Clippers. Like, I will gladly admit that I was way off on that series. I thought that they might be able to compete with them a little bit and battle. I didn't. After the first game, though, I probably overreacted a little bit because it was just a complete blowout. But I thought that series would be interesting because I thought Murray might struggle because the Clippers' wing defenders, they have a lot of them. They got 2 of the best wing defenders in Kawhi Leonard and Paul George to throw at him. So I thought that they would match up well there. But I thought Jokic could really feast in that series because Zubac, as much as people love him, I still like Zubac. I mean, I don't have any ill will towards him. I hope he goes on to have a great career. He seems like a good kid. Doesn't have a ton of playoff experience. So, I mean, going up against Jokic in your second, I think it was, he was played off the court basically against the Warriors last year, but not a ton of playoff experience for Zoo. But he did match up a lot better with Jokic than Montrezl Harrell did. And there were a lot of minutes that Harrell was in the game, and Jokic just feasted really on both of those guys, probably less so on Zubac, but more so on Harrell. But that was it. I mean, the Clippers don't have a lot of bigs. They don't have a lot of big man depth. I don't think Joakim Noah played in that series at all. And yeah, I thought that he could really feast in that series because of that, because the Clippers just didn't have big bodies to throw at him. They play kind of small ball. And the Lakers can go, as we've seen, they can go. I don't even like to call it small because I don't think Anthony Davis at the 5 and Markieff at the 4 and LeBron at the 3, the lineups that they were throwing out there aren't small. They're more versatile and mobile. The Lakers can play that way, but they can also play big, as we've seen kind of all year long, where they rotate Anthony Davis, Dwight Howard, and JaVale McGee, and usually have at least 1, if not 2 of those guys out there. And I think this is going to be a big Dwight series. I really do. I think JaVale, I wouldn't be surprised if the Lakers go back to their traditional starting lineup of starting JaVale and AD. I think in crunch time, you're going to see AD taking Jokic because I think there was some success there in the regular season. And I think AD is just the perfect type of guy to put on Jokic because if Jokic steps away from the basket, AD can go out there. He's very mobile, very athletic as for a big guy, very long, can contest shots. And if Jokic wants to go inside, AD's very good at protecting the rim, and his post-up defense is really good. Like, he's just an all-around great defender and the perfect type of guy you want to put on Jokic. So I think down the stretch you'll see probably AD at the 5 and the Lakers go a little bit smaller. But I think this is a big Dwight series. I think JaVale will still kind of play minimal minutes, even though I wouldn't be surprised if he starts. But I think Dwight Howard, after basically not playing in the last series because the Lakers went with their more versatile lineups to match up with Houston, I think Dwight's going to be a big factor in this series, and I think he can have success defending Jokic as well for similar kind of reasons. Obviously not the level of defender that AD is right now, but can do kind of the same things as an athletic big, a strong big that is not going to be easy to just post up and back down. Jokic is very crafty, and I'm not saying the Lakers are going to just shut him down, but I think that they match up fairly well with him and Murray as well. But those guys are both very, very dangerous. So offensively, actually, let's go ahead and start with defense because we're kind of on that track anyways. Defensively, what are some things you think the Lakers need to do to not only slow down the Nuggets, but more specifically Jokic and Jamal Murray, who are having great postseason runs?
I think the Nuggets are kind of the anti-Rockets to me. They're not a really ISO heavy team, even if they do have a guy like Jamal Murray who loves to take guys one-on-one and can do a great job of it. They are a team that is constantly moving. Like, they are cutting off the ball over and over again, running around screens because they have, one of the best passers in the league and a 7-foot, 300-pound dude that can basically throw any pass that he wants at any time. So for the Lakers, I think it's honestly less about how they guard Jokic. To me, it's important because he has he's a great scorer as well. But Jokic doesn't want to go out there and score 40 points. That's not his game. He's a great post-up player. He can shoot really well. He can take shots when he needs to. But his mindset is always, let me pass it to my teammates and get them the best shots possible. So I think it's more of a series where I think the Lakers guards, your KCPs, Danny Greens, Caruso's, etc. Even Rajon Rondo, if he does play off the bench as we expect him to, those guys need to be able to stick with their man at all times and be able to really cover them the length of the court, just because those dudes don't stop running. The Nuggets are really deep as well. Their backcourt is Murray and Gary Harris, but then they got guys like Torrey Craig and Monte Morris who aren't household names, but they can really score points in a hurry as well if you give them those opportunities. They are good players. So to me, that is probably the biggest key, is just being able to handle those guys. And then I think the bigs, whether it's just AD or if it's JaVale and Dwight also playing, their kind of attention to detail is also important. One of the Nuggets' favorite pet plays is having kind of like a dribble handoff between Jokic and Murray. And if those guys aren't stepping out, then Murray's drilling a 3 in your face or driving to the rim. If they're not getting back on Jokic quick enough, he's scoring or passing it out for a better shot, what have you. And on top of that, they have to guard a dude who, on top of his great scoring, is really great at shooting the ball, especially above the break. And JaVale and Dwight in particular don't love stepping out behind the 3-point line to contest shots. So it's a tough task for them to be able to guard Jokic well, but also be able to guard the smaller Nuggets players who are kind of running around those screens and dribble handoffs, and being able to provide that help. And the Lakers have obviously been the best defense in the league in the playoffs and probably throughout the year as well. But this is a much different series than against the Rockets, where they could throw double teams at James Harden, and that basically kind of just stopped anything happening for the Rockets on offense because they didn't move off the ball and James Harden wasn't running back to get the ball and trying something new.
Yeah, I think defensively, I think a key thing is there's, I think, some similarities in this series that we saw with the Lakers playing the Rockets, but there's also some things that I think that they can't really do. So I don't think that they can really double Jokic. I think we saw the Clippers double him quite a bit, and he's such a good passer. His vision is just great. He can, see the floor well, execute passes extremely well. and he burned them several times when they doubled him. So I think if you're the Lakers, if you're going to double, you better be very particular about it. The timing of it has to be really well executed. I just wouldn't double very often because of that. And another thing, the Lakers obviously in the last two series trapped Lillard and Harden both at midcourt and basically just try to get the ball out of their hands and then try and scramble, even though you're playing 4-on-3 a little bit when you do that for a brief second until guys can kind of rotate back. I don't think you can really do that necessarily, because if you allow Jokic to start a 4-on-3 possession because you trap Murray at midcourt, then it can be kind of problematic for you. So it's a little different where the Rockets just didn't have like that playmaker that could get in the middle of the floor and really dissect the defense. I thought once you got the ball out of Harden's hands, it almost felt like you took him out of the possession a little bit. I don't think you'll see that as much in this series. I don't think you can trap Murray at midcourt and just try and force the ball out of his hands. Obviously, he's not a household name like a Lillard or a Harden, but you kind of have to guard him similar, and you have to give him the same level of attention to detail because he's on just an absolute tear. He had a couple games against the Clippers where he really struggled to shoot the ball. But man, in that Jazz series, he was unreal. Finished off the Clippers in Game 7, I believe, with 40 points. Was just unreal in that game. He can fill it up, man. He can really, really fill it up. And I think defensively, the Lakers have got to have somebody attached to him at all times. I think your pick and roll coverage is going to be huge, which is why I think they go to AD at the 5 to close games, because he's the best guy in that position when they start going to Murray Jokic pick and rolls, that AD can come out and Murray can't just come off that screen and pull and fire for 3. Because AD is very good at getting out and having a stronger hedge, better than Dwight and JaVale, who play a little more kind of drop coverage a little bit. And you can't do that with Murray. You gotta be up and into him. Guys got to go over screens, and then the bigs that come and set the screen. Laker bigs have to come up and really extend their pressure as to not give him a clean look. And if he goes around that pressure, you got to have guys be willing to rotate over. And I think a guy like LeBron is going to be huge as kind of a secondary rim protector if they are pulling those bigs away from the basket. LeBron can obviously rotate over. And I mean, Jamal Murray's not like a high flyer or anything. So LeBron, I think, could rotate over and kind of protect the basket, especially if he's playing off of Jeremy Grant, who's not a great three-point shooter. Capable, but not a great one. So yeah, defensively, I think I wouldn't double Jokic. I wouldn't trap Murray at midcourt, but I would have somebody attached to him at all times, trying to deny him the basketball. Ideally, I think you're going to probably want KCP, Caruso, and Danny Green guarding him most, if not all, the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that point you made about the secondary rim protector, I think that's why the Lakers will go to those 2 big lineups for pretty significant portions of the game, because then if they have, let's say Dwight Howard guarding Jokic, that allows Anthony Davis to be kind of cheating off of Paul Millsap or Jeremy Grant or one of those bigs who aren't great shooters, as you said, and now he can provide you elite defensive player of the year level rim protection without having to really concede anything on Jokic or Murray.
Yeah, absolutely. So it'll be really interesting to see how Frank Vogel really attacks this team defensively. Obviously, you got some game film. The Lakers met these guys a couple times. Really, they only have 2 regular season matchups, I think, to really go off of because, I guess for us as speculation more so. You can always probably use game tape, but they played 4 times in the regular season. The 2 times that the Lakers won, the games were in Denver, and I think both teams were. I think one game the Nuggets might have had a guy or 2 out, but the core groups were healthy. The Nuggets beat the Lakers once in the regular season, and LeBron didn't play. That was in December, and then they played in the bubble, and the Nuggets, the Nuggets played their starters, I think, only like 20, 25 minutes, and they kind of closed the game with a lot of their bench guys. And Kuzma hit a game-winning 3 in that game. But the Lakers also didn't try very hard on defense in that game, so not a whole lot to take away from that. But let's transition to the offensive side of the ball. And after we do this, we're going to get into our predictions, and then we're going to take some questions for you guys, so get those ready to put in the chat. Whether you're streaming this on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitch. It should pop up in my chat here. I've got some from Twitch and YouTube so far. So if you got questions, that's coming up soon. So, but let's talk about offense, Hani. What would you do if you're the Lakers offensively in this series to really attack this Nuggets defense?
I think that the Lakers should be very, very happy that they can go back to the LeBron and AD pick and roll well. That was something they didn't really get to do a whole lot against Houston, at least to the extent that they did against the Blazers or throughout the regular season, because the Rockets just switch everything and you don't really create much of an advantage. There might be marginal ones. Maybe LeBron likes going at PJ Tucker more than he likes going at Robert Covington, but largely there's not much of a difference there. This series, they're going to be able to do that a whole lot more. And I think they are going to go to that a whole lot. Because as we said before, you can tire out Jokic. You can kind of, if you're forcing him to guard you in space, that's where he can kind of actually struggle a lot more. We talked about him being a better defender than given credit for, but he is still kind of a slower dude. His footwork, at least his movement and agility isn't as great as some of the other bigs around the league.
He has openly admitted that he's a slow player.
Exactly. And I've seen a lot of people talk about how it looked like he was playing on flip-flops in Game 7 and roasting the Clippers. And it kind of feels that way for sure. So going to that sort of pick and roll action, it gives AD a chance to kind of terrorize them down low, because he's going to be getting the ball with a head full of steam going at the rim. And we've talked about it ad nauseum that he's so much better when he's getting the ball in space and not having to create for himself, but kind of being able to use his quickness and his length. Jokic also, the way they do their pick and roll coverage is it's kind of a soft hedge. And credit to Nekias Duncan. I read a great breakdown that he had on the series. So you should definitely go look at that. It's a lot better than mine, but you should also read mine because clicks feed us. But yeah, they do a little bit of a soft hedge. He's not coming out to really trap the ball handler. He's not dropping all the way out into the paint either. And I think that's something that both AD and LeBron can exploit. I think LeBron can definitely go around him. He's a lot faster, and once he gets around him, there's not any rim protection. And same deal with AD. Especially if he kind of slips some of those screens, I think he's going to have a wide open lane. And as we saw in the last series, when there's not a rim protector or a shot blocker at the rim, LeBron and AD are going to go insane. And they shot it incredibly well at the rim against the Rockets because they don't have anybody over like 6'6". The Nuggets have better defenders, in my opinion, that can provide that rim protection, but it's mostly in the form of drawing charges or something of the sort. They're not really blocking your shot or really contesting you that well at the rim. So if they can get into that action a lot, and I think they will, especially late in games, I don't really see a great way for the Nuggets to protect against it, other than crowding the paint and daring the Lakers to shoot, which probably is their safest bet. But with the way the Lakers kind of shot at the end of that series against the Rockets, I feel a lot more confident about their ability to keep scoring as well as they did against Houston.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's an interesting point that you brought up was the lack of rim protection for the Nuggets. I think that's one kind of similar thing that we're going to see with this series that we saw in the Rockets series, and not really in the Blazers series, because the Blazers went with two traditional bigs, and as hilarious as Hassan Whiteside can be with his decision making sometimes as a player, he is a legit rim protector and paint anchor defensively. And so the Lakers didn't have to deal with that at all in the last series because the Rockets just refused to play big guys. I mean, their center was PJ Tucker, for crying out loud, and their best rim protector was probably Robert Covington, or Jeff Green. And like this series is kind of similar because Jokic is not really a rim protector. This team doesn't offer a ton in terms of rim protection. So if I'm the Lakers, I'm trying to get out in transition like they pretty much want to do against every single team. Obviously, I think the Nuggets are pretty good in terms of athleticism, and I think they can get out and run as well. And they can hit some threes, they can fill it up offensively. But I trust the Lakers if they get out in transition that they will score a lot of points in this series. And that all obviously starts defensively. When the Lakers are able to get stops, AD is a pretty damn good guy to just get the rebound and get the ball out and go. Plus he runs the floor extremely well. So it's always going to start defensively with this team. But I think offensively, one thing you'll see similar to what we saw with the Rocket series is getting LeBron downhill. I think getting LeBron and AD going downhill, and especially AD less so posting him up on Jokic. I think you'll see some of that, but I think getting him the ball on the move, especially diving to the basket, I think these guys will be able to just put up a lot of points at a high clip because LeBron and AD can finish around the basket because there is no really rim protection back there. So I think the Lakers really attack Jokic in pick and rolls. And I think they're going to attack Murray in a couple different ways. I think ultimately you just want to make those two guys work. After two 7-game series, I think this is the first time they've had 2 days off really since the playoffs started, if I'm not mistaken, because they went 7 games and then dove right into the Clippers series and got smacked in game 1, maybe because they were a little fatigued. But the Lakers, if you're the Lakers, you're fresh. So I would run. I would put Jokic in a ton of pick and rolls and make him defend in space. And then with Murray, I think you might see a similar kind of thing that the Lakers did with Lillard, with Damian Lillard, where they basically, whoever he was guarding was setting a ton of screens and kind of running around and just trying to make Lillard work on defense because they're going to try and probably hide Murray, similar to what Portland was doing with Lillard, obviously to conserve energy because they need him for offense. I think the Lakers, whether, whoever it is, whether it's KCP, Danny Green, whoever he's guarding, got to keep him on the move a lot and set screens on him, have that guy be the screener. Like, you just got to make Murray stay in constant motion, try and grind these guys down after playing 2 7-game series. And I think the Lakers will be fine if they do that. So get LeBron going downhill, or LeBron and AD going downhill, make Jokic defend in space, and really just make Murray work defensively. Because as good as those two guys are offensively, I think, especially given the 2 7-game series, the Lakers might be able to grind those guys down a little bit by just constantly attacking them when they have the basketball.
Yeah, and I think, the matchup hunting is going to be a crucial key for this. And I think LeBron is maybe the greatest player ever in the NBA in terms of understanding what matchup he wants and going at it. The Murray aspect is part of it, getting those guards to come set him screens to make Murray work, just like they did with Damian Lillard, as you pointed out. I also see, a guy like Michael Porter Jr., who has had some great offensive performances in these playoffs, but defensively he's been really hunted by other teams. And I think LeBron is a whole different step than, even the guys in the last round that went at him. And I think if you can get a guy like Michael Porter Jr. switched out on LeBron or have him guard a pick and roll with that LeBron is involved in, that is great offense. I'm really not too concerned about the Lakers getting points against this Nuggets team. Like I said, I think they're a solid team defensively. I believe they ended the season something like 16th in defensive rating, which isn't great, but for most of the year they were pretty good. I'm not entirely sure about this, but I think they kind of dropped off a little bit in the bubble, and that kind of impacted their numbers. But I don't think they have enough great options to guard LeBron. Kind of the same issue that really both of the previous teams have had. I think they have some decent ones, but a lot of them we've seen them try and not succeed. Paul Millsap is a guy that the Hawks tried to throw at LeBron that season, where they had 5 players of the month in the same month, and that didn't work out at all for them. Gary Harris is a great defender, but he is really small compared to LeBron. I don't think he's going to be giving up a lot of trouble. Grant might be their best option, but I'm still not too concerned about that. Will Barton might come back at some point in the series. It doesn't really sound likely, but it's possible. But I think he's too small and not as strong as LeBron as well. So I think LeBron is going to be able to have a great series as long as he's kind of picking and choosing his spots the same way that he has his entire career, really, in terms of hunting those matchups and really striking that balance between going for 30 a night, which I think he can get pretty easily, and still being able to get a guy like Anthony Davis involved so that they're keeping Jokic, running around on defense as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all if we see Jamal Murray get kind of the Lou Williams treatment that we saw when the Lakers played the Clippers back, I think it was in March or late February, right before the season went on the kind of the shutdown, the hiatus.
19 years ago.
Yeah, feels like it. So I think you'll see some of that where LeBron really hunted Lou Williams in that game. I think you'll see LeBron do that quite a bit in this series with Jamal Murray and really try and go after him. I would imagine they're going to stick Grant on him. But like you said, you basically echoed my thoughts. I think basically if you put Millsap on him, I think he's too slow to keep up with LeBron. And if you put anybody else, I think, on him, I think LeBron's just too strong, too big and too strong, too physical. So I don't think the Nuggets have a really good matchup for LeBron. I mean, let's be honest, most teams, if not all teams, don't. But I really like kind of how the Lakers match up in this series. But that's not to say that the Nuggets are going to be an easy out by any means. Obviously, they've earned. I think they've earned respect. I think they're due a ton of credit for coming back from down 3-1, because it takes a lot to do that once, but to do it twice, especially against a team that is as talented as the Clippers. And yeah, I mean, whether you think, there's a reason they were down 3-1. Yes, that's true, but they also came back from those deficits. So putting them away could be very difficult if the Lakers get to that point, which we'll talk about, I guess, here next in our predictions. Hani, I mean, I don't mean to rub this in, but I'm so far batting 1,000 with these predictions. I predicted Lakers in 5, and I predicted Lakers in 5 in both rounds. I don't know where I was going with that, and you said Lakers in 6, I believe, in both rounds. So you're undercutting the Lakers a little bit here. What's going on with that?
Look, I've talked about this a lot, and I think in life, in every aspect of life, whether it's marriage, your job, or your favorite sports team, you should be setting the expectations as reasonably low as possible, so that when things go a little bit better than you expected, it's even more of a satisfaction that you feel.
I really hope your several wives are not listening to this podcast.
Exactly. That's the thing. I set my expectations low, and then now I have multiple. Anyway,
you're sleeping on multiple couches tonight.
It's worth it. I'll just say that it's worth it. As for a prediction, after saying all of that, I'm gonna mess around and say Lakers in 4.
Ooh, that was my backup prediction if you didn't take my original prediction. So
it's just I don't even mean this as disrespect to the Nuggets, because I respect them more than literally any other team in the Western Conference, because the rest of them have been just trash. But I don't know. I don't see this as a great matchup for them. I think the fatigue factor is an aspect in this. I have the utmost respect for how resilient they've been. I've gained a lot of respect for Jamal Murray, who's a guy that I wasn't really in love with before these playoffs, but he's been amazing. Nikola Jokic, I think you could make a very solid argument that he's the best center in the league. There's been a big Anthony Davis versus Nikola Jokic, like who's a better player debate on Twitter for some reason, because we can't just enjoy players without having a comparison. But I think for me it's more of a preference thing. I think that they are on a similar level in just completely different ways. I would take Anthony Davis because,
AD better.
and that is why the Lakers won in 4. But yeah, I don't see how the Nuggets are going to be affecting the Lakers offense enough to really keep them from racking up those points. And while their offense is incredible, and I think they will be able to score quite a bit even against this Lakers defense, I just have a lot more faith on the Lakers and Vogel's adjustments. And to me, they do have the 2 best players in the series, and sometimes it does come down to something as simple as that. And I just think I just don't think the Nuggets quite have enough to really make this a series.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the Lakers match up very well with this team. And like I've been saying, it's not a slight to the Nuggets by any means. I like you, Hani, I have a ton of respect for this team, especially how they've been able to battle back in these 2 series. Less so in the Jazz series, because I thought they shouldn't have been down 3-1 in that series, because I didn't think the Jazz were that good, especially considering their player situation with no Bogdanovich, and I don't know if Conley missed time in that series, but he had been kind of in and out of the bubble a little bit. Anyways, but the Clippers series, I was very impressed with how they came back. I did not expect that at all. I'm going to say Lakers in 5. I'm going to stick to my Lakers in 5 trend. Maybe I'll just, if they get to the finals, maybe I'll just do Lakers in 5 the whole time. But I'm going to give the Nuggets a game, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was game 1, given the Lakers have had a lot of time off, and it's kind of similar to the Rockets series. They just looked really out of sync. I think they needed a game to really get a feel for the Rockets' speed and everything and how they play. But I think I wouldn't be surprised if the Lakers either A, smack the Nuggets in game 1, like we saw with the Clippers doing the same to the Nuggets in game 1. But I also could see the Lakers being a little rusty with a long layoff and not playing their best. And the Nuggets maybe still riding an emotional high, come out, guns blazing, and they steal game 1, and the Lakers win the next 4 after that. I don't know. I'm going to give the Nuggets a game just out of respect. Which feels like the most backhanded compliment ever.
Yeah,
but.
That sounds more disrespectful than picking the Lakers in 4.
Hey, man, for a hot take, if the Lakers would have played the Clippers, I still would have said Lakers in 5.
Woo! I think I would have agreed.
Like, I was leaning Lakers in 6, but after that series just kind of kept going on and on, I was going to say Lakers in 5. But I'll say Lakers in 5 for a lot of the reasons that you mentioned, Hani, the fatigue, how these rosters match up. I think the Lakers match up very well. And I'll give the Nuggets a game because what we saw with game 2 against the Clippers, that first half, they came out on fire. And they are capable of doing that if you don't lock in defensively, which the Lakers have had a tendency to do at times. They kind of have some stretches where they get a little lackadaisical, the effort's not great, and teams can put up a bunch of points. But the Lakers have done this thing where they kind of flip a switch off and on when they need to play and when they don't. And it's working so far. I would like to think that this team understands now it's winning time. We're 8 wins away from an NBA championship. Let's go get this thing. No more slacking. But I do think the Nuggets are very capable of just having a game where they go ballistic from the three-point line and just scoring a lot of points because Jokic and Murray are very good, plus the other guys that they have. They have some guys that are hot and cold, and I think there's possibly a game that those guys just get hot, like we saw in game 2 against the Clippers. Basically every second half after that. But yeah, so you're saying Lakers in 4. I'm saying Lakers in 5. We got some people in the chat saying Lakers in 6. I think the consensus is going to be the Lakers winning this series. I think they're still underdogs to me because I have a narrative to control. But, yeah, I think the Lakers, if all goes well, the Lakers will be punching their ticket to the NBA Finals when it's all said and done. So let's dive into these questions. You got our predictions, kind of a breakdown, offense, defense, all that, and just our general thoughts on the series. We want to hear from you guys. Let us know in the chat. I can see now that we are getting some from Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube. So let's dive into some of these questions. First one was from John on YouTube. Who do you think will step up and defend Murray? Personally, I think it's going to be a rotation of probably 3 guys, maybe 4. I think you'll see KCP start on him, and then you might see Danny Green start on him, but I think those 2 will defend him a lot, and I think Alex Caruso will get some minutes on him as well.
Yeah, I think those 3 will get the bulk of the minutes. I wouldn't be too surprised if Vogel goes to the Rondo route, kind of like he did against the Rockets, in terms of having Rondo guard Harden or Westbrook, really the length of the floor. Not necessarily what I would do, just because I feel like eventually playoff Rondo will cease to exist in a brutal manner. But I could see him just being a little bit of a pest for a few possessions at least, and kind of giving him trouble, even if it's just to make it a little bit tougher for him to dribble the ball up the floor and fatigue him a little bit more. I could see that being a little bit of an option as well.
I'm curious to see if LeBron checks Murray at all, because I think you might see him at times, not often, but maybe at times, maybe in critical possessions. I don't think the Lakers will be overly worried about switching onto Murray, whether it's LeBron. I don't think they want like Dwight or JaVale guarding him, but I also don't think that they mind AD switching out on him, because Murray, when he has had AD on him in their 2 main meetings in the regular season, he struggled. He really, really struggled, which most guys do with AD guarding him. So I don't think that. I think it's going to be a by committee approach, but I think ultimately it'll be those main 3 guys that I mentioned: KCP, Danny Green, and Alex Caruso. So let's see. Clippers equals what a choke job. Rivers should be fired. Doc Rivers is safe reportedly, so good news for everybody else in the NBA, but especially in the Western Conference. Let's see. Who's better, Kyle Kuzma or Michael Porter Jr.?
Give me Kyle Kuzma. Michael Porter Jr. Michael Porter Jr. has only seen one type of shot he doesn't like, and that is a vaccine. But beyond being a pretty good offensive player, man, that dude makes some dumb mistakes. It's not just him being a complete idiot off the floor, but on the floor he makes a ton of dumb mistakes, and he has a sieve defensively. Kyle Kuzma, I think he has really learned how to play in his role this year, and you know, I give a lot of credit to him. He's not going to be probably scoring as much as Michael Porter Jr. will, but he's capable of that. He's capable of being a little bit more of a playmaker, and he's a much better defender than Michael Porter Jr. is.
I think both guys can really hit some tough shots. I think that they have a lot of capabilities offensively as scorers. I trust Kyle Kuzma, especially this version that we've seen in the bubble, defensively a hell of a lot more than I trust Michael Porter Jr. And because that's not even a slight to MPJ, it's more just Kuzma's been really good defensively for the Lakers in the bubble. So I think, I mean, I would take Kuzma, especially this 3-and-D wing that we've seen in the bubble. He's been very efficient offensively and has made good decisions, taken good shots, been, you know, really good cutter, pretty good spot up shooter, and just defends a hell of a lot better than Michael Porter Jr. So give me Kyle Kuzma as well. Let's see. How will the Nuggets look to lock down the Lakers' best player, KCP?
Okay, first of all, we got to acknowledge that this is from Zane, and this is like his fourth question about KCP on multiple platforms right now. What are you doing? But the real answer is that there is no hope to locking down KCP. You can only hope to slow him down, or that he takes some mercy on you.
What he said. Let's see. Joe Dominguez on Facebook says, "Do you think THT gets any minutes?"
I kind of doubt it. Like we said earlier, JaVale and Dwight are probably going to be playing again this series. It's just a lot of minutes going to a lot of guys. And the Lakers' playoff rotation is already a lot more extensive than most teams would play in the playoffs. I would love for THT to get a few more minutes just because of the disrespect factor, but I don't necessarily see him playing, at least not significantly, maybe a few minutes here and there.
I find your lack of faith rather disturbing.
Look, we already showed a little too much of the secret weapon in the second round. We got to hold them for the finals.
Release the Kraken. Just do it. I think THT does get minutes in this series. I don't think it's a lot, but I do think he gets some. I also think there's going to be a game in this series where the Lakers just blow out the Nuggets. At least one game, and I think he gets some minutes there. But I wouldn't be surprised either to see Vogel go deep into his rotation, because the Nuggets, like we said, that fatigue factor I think is going to come into play at some point. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Vogel take advantage of that and say, hey, I'm going to throw out, you know, some more guys and go with a deep rotation and keep guys fresh. LeBron and AD haven't really played like a high volume of minutes that you would expect in the playoffs so far, so they're already fresh. Yeah. I think you can keep them even more fresh for these fourth quarters if it comes down to that. But I do think at the very least, there's going to be a game where the Lakers just crush the Nuggets in this series, and THT gets at least some garbage time minutes. So I do think he gets in there, though. He played really well against the Rockets. Well, I mean, at least far better than I think anybody expected.
Once again, just as a quick reminder, he outscored Daniel House in the series.
He did. All
right.
And he actually stayed for the whole series. So who will be more effective, Gary Harris or Jeremy Grant?
Look, I may be brown and I may have a big nose, but I'm not brown nosing when I say that Gary Harris, with a beautiful first name, will have the better series. I'm genuinely a really, really big fan of Gary Harris. I love his game. And he's had a pretty tough year this year, but I think he had a really great series against the Clippers. He is a monster defensively, and he can knock down shots and put the ball on the floor against the closeout. I really like his game. I think he could potentially have a really good series.
Yeah, I would say so as well. I trust Gary Harris's offense more than I trust Jeremy Grant, just with their shooting. Like I said earlier, Grant is a capable shooter, but I'm a big fan of Gary Harris mainly because of his first name. but but no, I think he is a solid player. I think he's a very quality role player, and I think he's a little bit of an X factor in this series for the Nuggets. I think they're going to need him to step up and play well. I think they're going to need a few of those role guys to really step up and be consistent and really bring it both offensively and defensively. But yeah, I would say Gary Harris, but I mean I'm a fan of Jeremy Grant as well. I think he's a quality player, and I knew back when the Nuggets got him that was going to be a quality pickup for them. So yeah, I think we both go with Gary Harris there. So. I think that's it for questions. I don't see any more. There's, some more KCP questions. But, yeah, I think that's going to do it for us. Like I said, I didn't want this to go too long. So we're going to be doing these after every single game, and we're going to be doing a series preview pod hopefully for the NBA Finals as well, if the Lakers can get by the Nuggets and advance to the NBA Finals. So, yeah, I'm liking how these live streams are turning out. I really enjoy those of you that send us questions in the chat or comment in the chat. I love it. I really do. Really appreciate it. So, yeah, we're going to get out of here. We'll be back on tomorrow night and hopefully recapping finally a Lakers Game 1 win.
Yeah, absolutely. I am looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to – actually, I was going to say another night of slander, but I respect the Nuggets too much to do that to them. They're not fraudulent in the ways of the Clippers.
Unless it's like a sweep where the Lakers win every game by 20-plus points.
Yeah, I mean, I'll find it in me. It would be painful, but I'll find it in me to make some jokes then.
I won't hesitate. So, no, Nuggets Twitter has some good dudes over there. So, I do respect them, and I respect their team. But I think the Lakers are going to win. So. So yeah, that's gonna do it for us this time. As I mentioned, guys, with these live streams, you can get them at 3 different places. Facebook, like us on Facebook, just find us Lakers Outsiders. You search us, we'll pop up. Subscribe to us on YouTube as well, and you can set those alerts so that when we go live, you get an alert and you can just dive right in. We're usually kind of sitting there just for a couple minutes just to let people kind of gather, give you time to get in there and get going in the chat and all that stuff. And of course, twitch.tv/Lakers Outsiders. We're there as well. Be sure to follow us on there, and all the following, the subscribing, all that stuff. You guys don't know how much that helps us and how much we appreciate that. So we would appreciate it for those of you that haven't. If you guys do that would be great. And again, on YouTube, if you could like this video as well, really helps us out. So, and of course, as always, you can follow our socials, Twitter and Instagram at Lakers Outsiders. And like I said, like us on Facebook and get all of our content, including Hani's well-written series preview piece on LakersOutsiders.com. You can't follow Hani on Twitter at Raptors Outsiders anymore because they're done. But you can still follow him at HONIAHM, and you can follow me at Gary Kester.
I was about to say, oh, how sweet, and then you went and did that.
I'm never gonna give that up. Maybe if the Lakers win the title, I'll give it up. But yeah, that is gonna do it for us this time, guys. Thank you guys so much for listening in, for contributing in the chat. Always appreciate the support. But yeah, until next time, this is Gary Kester with Hani Ahmadian and the Lakers Outsiders signing off.
Shout out Isaiah Thomas.